Hey, what's going on?
Hey Sam, how you doing?
Doing all right. Everyone's getting out of their. We were all just in a meeting internally, so everyone's coming here in a second.
Gotcha. I take it you're a red hat then?
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm
gotcha.
on the same team as Alex and Jen and David.
Okay, cool. Do you have a server behind you on a table?
Yeah,
Nice.
two servers and these little arm blades that are PoE based.
Cool.
You can attach NVMe's to them and all that fun stuff. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I had to move my server stuff into like another room because it's so dang loud.
I made sure I got quiet 80 millimeter fans here, and
Mhm.
then the only noise out of that super micro is just the power supply because it's running on a heatsink, and then all these are heat sinks too. So everything downstairs is quiet. Everything upstairs is a different story.
Gotcha. Oh, Cat, we can't hear you.
There we go. What arm blades you got there?
The ones from Pine 64, they're solar quartz, and then yeah, the pine blades over there, they're attached to it.
Cool. I am looking forward to the compute blades for the Raspberry Pi CM4 that I should be getting in the next few weeks.
I've been waiting for them ever since the guy who was making them tweeted about them a year and a half ago. I was like, man,
Yeah, he's it's definitely been an adventure for sure.
I'm
I,
just happy.
I backed the Turing Pi V2 on Kickstarter,
Mm-hmm.
and allegedly that should ship really soon. Like I got my shipping or my order is ready notification through Kickstarter, and then I had to like claim it on the Turing Pie site. So we'll
Yeah,
see.
I did that a while ago, and I'm just like, I don't know which one's gonna arrive first. We'll just have to see. Okay. All right. It looks like we are approaching 5 after, so it's safe to go ahead and get started. I'm going to pull up the agenda and share screen. I know I added some stuff to the agenda earlier in the week, but that should not make anyone else feel shy about adding their things. So definitely feel free to grab that agenda and add stuff that is important to you. There's the link in chat in case that helps. Host disabled participant screen sharing. God damn it. I thought I already solved that problem. Let's see. At least it looks like people were able to get in before I joined, so that's at least a step in the right direction. And apparently I'm not logged in as me on my main join. So hang on just a second.
But yeah, like there's been that. There's been the new ones like the Rock 5, and then the other Arcade 35, like the latest gen of the Rock chips, which are performing really fast. I got myself an Orange Pi 5, like no delays in shipping or anything else like that, and that's not running two of my routers, and it's like an 8 core, 2.4 gigahertz, like 1.8 gigahertz on another 4 cores. It's awesome. 2.5G built into, like, I was impressed.
Zoom sharing on Linux is not being happy. Okay, hang on. Eventually I will get good at this.
If you can find, take your time.
And my browser's locking up. Fudge nuggets on the Mac. Why? I'm gonna have to cut off all of my commentary preceding the actual meeting. Okay, let's do it this way then. There we go, that'll work. Okay. Things should be sharing. And go. Like to. And I'm not using the browser I intended to use. There we go. Okay. Should be good to go. All right. So welcome all to the weekly Emporous Community Meeting. If you are in attendance and you haven't yet, please go ahead, pull up the agenda and record your attendance. Greatly appreciate having visibility into that over time. It will help with a lot of things in the future. And let's see. So regarding broken links, those will start having valid hyperlinks shortly as some of the in progress PRs from online. I'm not seeing anyone in attendance that is new. So we're going to just go ahead and skip over the intros. And jumping into the agenda. Jennifer, if you want to speak to your item, we'll start with that.
Sure. It actually is kind of related to your third item, and that is we've had a couple messaging changes that haven't been thoroughly discussed by the group. And so my proposal is that we identify extremely high visibility areas like the tagline for the organizations, certain things on the website, and we use like code owners or just GitHub settings to require a certain number of approvals on that from either organization owners or docs maintainers. So I kind of just wanted to put that idea out there.
I think that's consistent with a lot of other setups out there, and I would be comfortable with that. We have a third.
I concur.
Sweet. I'm going to say that that is approved. And we haven't officially set any kind of governance for that type of approval, but until we write that in, if we have no objections, we'll go with that. Awesome. Jen, do you think, sorry, Jennifer, do you think we need to like specifically assign adoption of that to someone? Or should it be like individual code owners go in and make sure that their repos are conformant? How do you think we should roll that out?
I think that maybe we assign one person, it could be an org maintainer or docs maintainer, to identify these places, because I think a couple of them are the kind of group owned repos, like the .github repo, and then maybe they coordinate with any code owners that need that they would need their cooperation on.
Okay, so do you want to open a bug, or if there's already one that's relevant, modify a bug on the .github repo and set that to include like all of the repos, either in like checkbox format or whatever suits your fancy, for all the other repos, and we can just create like other related bugs as needed and knock that out real fast that way. We can probably do that this week.
Yep, I can do that.
Cool. Awesome. All right then. So I added a couple things that are going to include some conversation, and I'm hoping for a lot of varied input. Before we dive into the stuff that I put on the agenda, is there any other items on the agenda that someone else is thinking about or hesitant about putting on, or maybe wants me to drop on the agenda for you? Awkward silence ensuing to try and spur on conversation.
I mean, I guess I haven't put it, I can add to the agenda here, but there's been some question about like if there's an organization or somebody who wants to interact with Emporous, you know, with it as an open source initiative. So like they want to leverage Emporous for their own use case, but also potentially contribute back to Emporous. We have the community organization, and I was just trying to get the group's thoughts on what makes sense as far as like special interest relationship back to this community. Do we want those special interests? I think we've discussed how they could submit a PR to Parabolos for their own namespace within that organization. I know there's some groups who are discussing wanting to establish a more formal relationship with Emporous, the Emporous community. So yeah, I just throwing that out there is, do we feel that the governance that we've already have proposed or established is sufficient in defining that, or do we need additional guidance through the governance docs in Emporous?
Okay, so if I'm understanding the general question, and paraphrasing, there are other interests, whether it's organizations or members or potential organizations and members who want to participate in Emporous either as downstream or as downstream with upstream activity. How do we direct them to feel empowered as part of the community and the GitHub community Emporous organization, and make sure that that is cohesively connected to the core Emporous organization?
Yeah, and then also, what are the qualifying criteria to establish an affiliated or special interest group under the Emporous community?
Yeah. So what I would recommend is that they, if they want a repo and to be maintainers on that repo, then writing a Google Doc of their proposal and sharing that with the Emporous group would be a good way to start. Either opening and then inviting conversation either in the community meeting or on the mailing list, so that everyone is aware of that proposal. Then we can all suggest, especially going for our first proposal and invitation like that. I'm imagining the Trailblazer, we will probably have some learning experience to go through. But just having that foundational, hey, this is what we imagine we would like to do. This is how we would like to be represented, whether that's opening a PR or opening a GitHub repo or what have you. And then it should probably include a statement about how they intend to maintain and own whatever it is that they open, because there are different types of interests that I've seen in other organizations where someone might want to submit a feature or have their project imported into an upstream organization or a community organization. But they may or may not want to retain maintainer status or ownership status over that submission over time. So upfront commitment to whether or not they do or do not want to own that over time and what that ownership looks like would be helpful for the beginning of the conversation. Otherwise, we're just going to sit around asking questions and being unsure. So that level of transparency right out of the gate would help. And then if they are okay with being a trailblazer, setting expectations that, hey, we're going to establish a governance around this process as we take you through it.
Okay. I like your thoughts on this personally. I'm not a big fan of the Google Doc approach. Maybe I would prefer that they just post open an issue and then link that issue to their Parabolas PR so that they can validate their request for a new repository. Then regardless though of those mechanisms, where do we want the specific direction? Like, do we want this to live in the Emporous organization, or do these directions need to be within the Emporous Community organization.
So because the Emporous Community Organization doesn't have a .github repo to manage and maintain the Parabolos, action
it
is
does.
on that. Does it? Do we have a repo for that? Okay.
Yeah, it does. It has parabolas.
Is the Parabola set up?
Mhm.
Yes, it is. Okay. So I like the idea of the PR, and that should accompany the proposal. But I think the proposal in a Google Doc is a good way for everyone to comment, have threads, things like that. We can create a PR template in the .github organization after we've gone through this one time. And then once we have that template, we can direct people to it. But while we are figuring out the components of the template, I think it would be more fluid in a Google Doc. I don't want to do Google Docs for everything all the time. So I am in agreement, Alex, that I think Google Docs overall are a bit more unruly, and the PR and template is a good approach in the future. But I don't know if we're ready for that yet. How do you feel?
If you tell me where to propose the directions for this, I can PR that to wherever the group would prefer, and then maybe we could just have a group discussion about what the best medium to convey that information is.
It should probably go in the community repo, honestly.
Yeah.
Specific repo? Oh, you said in the community repo in the Emporous organization?
Or, Kat, you can correct me if I'm wrong. We have a community page on the website, or both, maybe?
So the community page on the website and the community repo in the Emporous GitHub organization are good places to direct people to Emporous Community Organization on GitHub. When we have a template in the Emporous Community .github repo, then I think that template should facilitate people proposing that either things are migrated or like repos are transferred into Emporous Community, or otherwise, proposals are made for how they want to be represented, have their work, get a repo or a home or whatever. So yes, I think the Emporous Community Organization makes sense for what I'm hearing so far. But
Okay.
I would like to see their proposal for what they want in a Google Doc. And then we use the final state of that Google Doc to create the template in the Emporous Community.github repo, so that future interests can use that template as either opening a bug or probably a PR template for that purpose.
Okay, I'm just gonna PR the Emporous or community repo with some type of guidance on the process, and then we can just whittle it down there, if that's okay.
We can try that. I don't know if it will
Okay.
be fluid enough to help this interest quickly. But if they want to join our next community meeting, then we can definitely answer more directly without well, maybe they want this, or maybe they want that, or guessing at what they want. right?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'll just open up a PR so that because this needs to be established so that people can reference it. So I'm just going to start something. If we find we want that, whatever the documentation of the documented process, where we want that to live, I guess we can just talk about where we want that to move around if the community repo is not the right place.
Empress community or Empress?
That's what I'm asking is like, if I submit a PR with directions on how to engage in this process, where should that PR be submitted to?
The Empress community org is where I would recommend we facilitate this stuff. And then in the Empress org community repo, we can point contributors to the Empress community org .github repo for PRing their interest.
Okay, all right.
Based on
I'll get something together. Okay.
Yep. Okay. Okay, cool. Okay. So this past week we got the Empress GitHub org community repo created. With that established, it kind of opens up some other conversations around previous PRs and how they should be honed. So I think there was the beginning of some conversation on that. Thank you, Jennifer. Looks like. Let's open this in a new tab. Oh yeah, this is what I wanted to open. Okay, so Jennifer, I don't know if the fastest way to get up to speed on this for the meeting would be just to hear what your intent is.
Yep, I can do that. So this is meant to be, let's say, an extremely high level design document. I'm hoping by getting some additional feedback, we can hone in on a few more things. So Alex actually framed it as like a technical, documenting the technical approach. And in this case, it's in the context of how Emporous could help with secure supply chain. So what you see there is not what might look like a quick start is just a mock CLI to say like, this is how you could interact with the API. And then it does have some basic concepts to give a background. And then it has some design information a bit lower than that. It probably could use a high level architecture document as well, but that hasn't been added yet.
Okay.
Or not document, diagram, excuse me.
Okay, so if our end result from that PR is information specific to the design intent of the supply chain application of Emporous. I know right now that is like the core driver for Red Hat with Emporous. Is that going to be the only focus for Emporous right now, or is it one of several interests possible for the theoretical application of Emporous? I don't want to box the entire project in if it's not appropriate, but I definitely do want to scope down the entire project for its intended design as narrow as possible, so people feel like they can be productive with the realistic scope of Empress, at least now, even if that grows in the future.
So on to kind of address what you're asking, Jennifer had kind of, I think last week she'd been kind of noticing that some of our messaging is difficult because the project conflates the conceptual model, data model with the client functionality. So I think that we need to do a better job of teasing those concerns apart. As far as Red Hat's concerned with Emporous, I would say that that's all like conceptual. Like, I think that Red Hat views it as a one approach. I think there's many right now in the space, and so I think that we would need to probably continue working to further refining our stated focus in this as it pertains to like the client side functionality. And this particular client, I think, is tracking more closely to supply chain management concerns. And I'm not really sure if any of that really is helpful in kind of addressing what you're saying, but that's my initial thoughts after from hearing your exchange.
I have a proposal. I agree it doesn't belong here, especially because this says community. I was thinking that maybe we do, it might be a little early for this, but I was thinking maybe we create an enhancements repo. I know we don't really have anything to enhance yet, but maybe this could start, we could create templates for like, this is how you make a proposal to Emporous core functionality as a whole, as a system. And then maybe this could like seed that. But I'm also open to it going on the website as well. I just feel like this could be more of a living document, and the website, since it's going to be on a release schedule, seems like it could be a bit static.
Okay, so I'm hearing that the full scope of Empress's design is not incredibly concrete, but the supply chain scope is concrete. And we need to figure out how to represent both the immediate concrete evolution of what's proposed in this design scope, and we need to do it in a way that allows it to evolve out of step from the versioned development of current Empress releases. Did I say things that make sense or are in or out of line with what needs to happen?
No, I think that's essentially right. It's like as a community right now, I think we have to be asking the question, and I'm saying this kind of jokingly, but like, what's the hook going to be, right? Like, what is, and yes, I said that deliberately, terribly. I think that what it comes down to is supply chain security is the hotness. Like, we could use Emporous to manage cat pictures, but what's going to be compelling to the industry to get real people really excited about our technical approach to this? I think that is supply chain considerations. But I do agree that the existence of this particular PR in a repository named community seems out of place. And after thinking about it for the past 4 seconds, I think I would suggest to put it back with the client.
Okay. I feel like the answer to this question will actually be determined based on another question which I have that I have, which Andrew and I discussed briefly in Slack over the weekend. Right now we are building and publishing a new website every week, or on every merge to the website's main, which I like trunk development. But now that we have Netlify previews built, what I would like to propose, and I think this helps here, is that we have either a latest or a release branch for our website code base so that we can merge things to main and have previews built on Netlify that show that trunk, but that don't automatically publish the new content from main unless we either tag it so that it's associated with a specific release, or we PR against the release or latest branch, whichever naming convention we want to go through. That way the website can have previews built against the trunk that we then approve before release. And it doesn't mean that we have a release on every PR to the trunk, because we might want to pull in 5 or 6 different PRs, especially since we have submodule linking. So we might want to facilitate the ability to merge 5 or 6 PRs before we publish another revision of the website. And I think that this proposal would facilitate the ability to have versioned docs as well as a latest docs or a latest website publishing mechanism, so that we can conform to the stability required by versioned docs and website, while also helping with things like the enhancements repo, for example, that we might want to publish website artifacts from without being stuck in just the versioned release cadence. Did I make any sense with what I said? Hopefully what's in my brain and what I said is coherent.
It made sense to me. It's a similar approach that I take with some of my personal sites in terms of creating a preview and then actually pushing out the final build of the site. I'm using Hugo and Azure static websites, but it's the same essential concept. And it works nicely for an army of one. I imagine it would work well for multiple people. How does the version docs thing work? Is that something to do with Docusaurus and the way that Netlify builds the site?
Yeah, so the Docusaurus support for versioning changed with the new version of Docusaurus, which we are running. And basically we enumerate the versions that we support, and then the Docusaurus templates generator handles the rest of that, so long as we like just PR the version pinning that we want. It just does the rest for us while it builds the site, so that there are those versioned releases. And then I think if we do the release branch, we can cut tags that are tagged on the release branch. And that should, it's very similar to how Red Hat does a lot of their versioned releases, where they have a release slash, what is the versioning called? Semantic versioning. But it's basically that release slash the xyz.x.y.z syntax. That way you can actually go in and fix something in an older version of docs if something needs fixed, and then just have it as a minor release bump for the docs.
Okay.
I am not incredibly well experienced at long-term operations of the doc stuff, so this is all hypothetical in my head, but I think we can finish nailing that down if we easy enough, like that's clear in my head. Then if we can actually decide whether or not to break the publishing of the website off of the main branch and into a latest or release branch. Andrew suggested that we have a trunk that is devel or staging or whatever, and that that main continues to be the publishing branch. My biggest concern there is if someone forks the repo and then we merge their PR, I don't want there to be unnatural confusion for what branch their PR is supposed to go to. We can document it and say, hey, make your PR to the staging or the, devel branch or whatever. I just feel like that would increase the chances of mistakes and contributor fatigue. But Andrew is not here to represent his opinion, so I really can't speak for Andrew.
I think what you've said makes a lot of sense, and I think that it sounds like, from what I'm hearing, Andrew is in agreement, and I think the implementation is kind of is personal preference on some levels here, but I think that the overall workflow that you're describing makes sense. So
okay, so making assumptions on moving forward with what I proposed, and any other dissenters are just raising pedantic differences if we need to change to conform to an alternate iteration. The general theme is there, so I'm going to move forward.
Sounds good. And just so I understand how it's being hosted today, is it currently is the main site currently being published to GitHub Pages, and we're moving to
Yes.
Netlify?
Well, so we're going to continue to use GitHub Pages. We are just building previews of PRs and merges to main in Netlify. So what we can do is use Netlify just for that preview visibility, so that people actually feel like they can see what they get from the site without having to run the site locally just for their PR, and then tell people what the site looked like when they built it locally. Everyone can, share one view of what that PR does to the site in real time. And so they see the preview in individual PRs, But then once their PR is merged to main, that also gives us, here, I can actually go to it directly, I think. Can I move this thing? Yes, I can. All right, let me actually just go there real quick. I think this should get us, yes. So this builds off of main automatically all the time. So we can always see like this is like what the site looks like off of main before it is published to emporous.io is the general idea. That way, if we have a milestone for let's rework the entire front page, or let's implement a whole new standard for navigation on the left, if that has to occur over multiple PRs, then we can actually get all of those several PRs merged into the site, see the preview, and then agree that it's time to cut it and publish it to the latest or release branch.
Mm-hmm. In terms, so if someone has a PR that's running, does it create another preview site that's specific to that
Yes.
PR? Oh, okay. All right.
What
It's
I
all coming
showed
together
is the main build that builds every time it's merged to main. But on individual PRs, like Sam could see, I think, see if we are, yeah, see, you get specific PR previews for individual PRs. So you can actually go see, okay, how does this render when on just this individual PR?
Okay. And so, yeah, as we refine that process, we definitely have to document that process somewhere for contributors like myself.
Contributing
like,
to
I
the
don't
site will
understand.
have its own contributors.md, so you can see as a contributor to the site how to get that stuff PR'd, how to see the builds, things like that.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to move forward with getting that set up so that we are not publishing off of main. And when that PR is ready, I will share it for the group. The reason I felt that that was important to what we were talking about is, Jennifer, if we have an enhancements repo and we want some of that to be visible on the website, then what we can do is make changes as we need to the enhancements repo, have the pages that in that repo that need to be visible on the website built into the website itself, and we can release those to the release branch out of step from the release cadence for the normal docs builds, is my theory there. And that way we're satisfying the needs of versioning things for like Emporous Go API and client documentation, but also supporting updates to the site in between versioned releases. Obviously, all of this needs to be written down and captured and documented. If what I'm saying makes sense, does that maybe meet your needs?
That works for me. I can, just to get a feel for how everyone feels about the enhancements repo, I'll just put a .github PR in.
Cool.
And trying to add it, and we can see what kind of feedback it gets.
Okay. On that PR that you open, can you include a link to another enhancements repo on a different project that kind of serves the purpose that you're needing? So we can kind of get a feel for exactly how you see that playing.
Yep, I can do that.
Awesome. Cool. I'm excited. All right, then. Those two things should hopefully meet those needs. And then when that stuff is done, then we can handle the questions as far as scope of what you're designing and whether that scope fits inside of a larger enhancements supported scope, which I think the enhancements repo would make pretty easy to solve. Okay, so last thing on the agenda before jumping into the PR is just the smart proxy terminology. I don't know if we have time to get into the philosophical intent of what should and should not be encompassed by that statement or how universal that statement is. So I think one of my real questions that helps scope that in is we have client components of Emporous that is a reference client, and we have API components. I'm wondering if our docs should actually explain the API and the client separately so that we can understand what to do with the API if we're not even going to be using the client. Because a lot of APIs include, when they're documented, include like whether it's Postman or curl commands. Like, here's an example of how to form a request, a query, whatever, in a universal way that are not dependent with our reference CLI implementation, or they can often show a snippet in TypeScript or Golang that imports a library and says, this is an example of how to call it within a language. But a lot of times you can have tabbed code snippets that show a curl command, a importable Postman query, or a snippets of code as well in their different languages. And you just use that tabbed interface for the code snippet to see the view that you're wanting to see as a developer or as an end user.
I was just going to clarify, there's actually, as far as I can tell, there's two APIs in question right now. There's the distribution. It's our prototype of the distribution search API. And then there's a gRPC API that the client can instantiate to separate like client responsibilities. So you could host part of the client on a remote, and then you could run part of the client locally and connect to that remote instance. It would then communicate with the distribution API. I don't think any of those APIs are really, I mean, I think that probably the most locked in we have is the gRPC API, and I don't know, I'd defer to Jennifer to kind of talk about how much that's going to stick. I don't think that any of our recommendations for the OCI distribution search API, I don't think we have any of that flushed out yet. We have, for the demos, we had a kind of like a REST implementation, and that's not going to be sufficient for the type of queries that we expect to be doing against that endpoint. So I don't think that we really have much of the API decided, but I'd defer to Jennifer too.
So I agree that smart proxy was kind of my first thought when I was putting that in for when we were doing the rebranding. Luckily it's only in 2 places, so I've kind of already put up PRs so we can do more collaboration and nail something down. And I've kind of replaced it with toolkit to be more broad, but we could even say tools and libraries to even be even more broad. We do have a gRPC API. I think that is going to stay. I would not count anything having to do with registries as part of Emporous. It's part of the goals, but that goal, we're not going to have registries. Our goal is to interact with registries. So yes, I wouldn't really count the distribution as part of Emporous. So what I would say now is it's a client. There's a client. You can serve a gRPC server off of the client. Eventually that will be its own standalone service. And we have libraries. So if we could collaborate on the best way to say that in a short sentence, I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, I like toolkit and libraries. I guess what we need to do then is probably have an Emporous port of distribution. Then we also have the enhancements repo. And between the two, we can represent the outcomes that we're trying to achieve with Emporous while correctly homing the things that should be OCI upstreamed and the things that are owned by Emporous utilizing the enhancements repo and the Emporous Go docs. So if we have a docs directory in each of those, then we can unify visibility across those in our website with minimal effort so that they correctly build with whatever updates we merge into each of those repositories as necessary. And then we don't have all the lift of, well, our documents, our docs still in sync with what is in the Emporous org repos or not. But that should make ownership of which information lives where easy enough to represent. And then documenting, even if it's a very living document, like what is OCI like responsible for in all of this? What is responsible in the Emporous API and what is the Emporous CLI? Being able to represent that in a rudimentary form, even if it changes and evolves, I think will be necessary to getting community growth and collaboration to start taking off. It's my guess. We're approaching time. So dissenting arguments or affirming arguments, you have 2 minutes.
I don't have anything to dissent with, but I did have something to kind of conclude this with, if that's okay.
Go for it.
So there's a PR out, and I'm not going to link to it. It's the OCI's conversation around their official stance on OCI artifacts. It's like PR 999. The point of the reason I want to bring this up is because I think has really important context into around like OCI and artifact support and the OCI's technical oversight board, technical developer community, what their opinions are about what an OCI artifact is, how those are supported, and all that. And I think that's very important to us because we're using some flavor of OCI artifacts when we're publishing Emporous content into a registry. And so I just kind of like wanted to set the stage there. We're looking at the OCI 1.1 release coming up. That is going to be, whether you use overloaded image manifests for artifact purposes or we have a separate artifact manifest specification, the functionality as it pertains to Emporous is really going to be the same regardless of what the manifest type is. Where we're going to see deviations though is in specific registry implementations. Implementers will have different validation requirements on those manifest media types and different concerns. I think we're going to see some incompatibilities as we look at portability across registries. But I think the overall ecosystem as a whole, because we see Brew, what is it? Is it Homebrew or Brew? I don't know. I'm not a Mac user, but they moved from cask to bottles, I think, based on OCI. The OCI distribution is a distribution point for those. We have Helm charts. We have a lot of other content types that are being published as OCI artifacts, and so I think that puts us in a good place, regardless.
Yeah.
and I hit time, and I'm sorry about that.
No, you're fine. Jennifer, I see you adding PRs that need attention. Can you be noisy about those in Slack? And I know some of them have to do with me. I will make sure to give those attention.
Yep, I'll post them all in there.
Awesome. Okay. Post them separately so we can thread the conversation as needed. And with that, we hit time. I need to jump to another meeting. So I'm going to adjourn. Thank you all for your participation and your presence. Again, as always, we will be here same time, same place next week.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Kat.
Thanks.